In 1999, the Whitfield family of 4 vanished one Sunday evening after returning from a lake trip. Their car was found parked neatly in the driveway, groceries still in the trunk, dinner half prepared on the counter. No sign of struggle, no fingerprints other than their own. And one eerie detail, a single line scratched into the dining table with a key. Some things don't stay buried. 2 decades later, investigative journalist Claire Hensley reopens the case for a true crime docu-series and uncovers evidence suggesting the family's disappearance was part of a cover-up involving real estate fraud, small-town corruption, and a body that was never meant to be found. The home video opens with sunlight flashing off the hood of a blue minivan. Laughter spills through tinny audio as the Whitfield family cruises down a rural highway lined with lake pines. Daniel Whitfield drives, 40, clean-cut, steady hands on the wheel. Beside him, Elaine hums along to a summer pop song, twisting her wedding ring absently. In the back seat, Sophie and Jack fight over a bag of trail mix. "Smile for the camera," Elaine says, turning the camcorder toward her husband. He grins, but the smile doesn't reach his eyes. "Almost home," he says. "Just 20 more minutes." The camera tilts, catching a flash of road sign. Marin Falls, 10 miles. Then static cuts across the screen. When the image steadies again, it's dusk. The van slows in the Whitfield's driveway. The footage wobbles as Elaine climbs out, juggling grocery bags. The camera catches brief glimpses, the porch light flickering, Daniel unlocking the front door, Sophie chasing their cat across the lawn. Then the frame holds on something odd. Daniel stands in the doorway, frozen. He's staring at something inside the darkened house, expression unreadable. Elaine's voice drifts from behind the camera. "Danny, you okay?" No answer. The image jumps, the sound of a thud, a sharp intake of breath, then silence. Static floods the tape. August 29th, 1999, 10:47 p.m. A police cruiser idles outside the Whitfield home. The front porch light still flickers. Inside, the kitchen is neat. Dinner plates set on the table, half-filled glasses of milk sweating under the overhead light. The groceries are unpacked, ice cream melted into syrup. Detective Harlan Boyd moves slowly through the house, his flashlight beam gliding over details that won't make sense for years. 2 chairs pulled back from the table, a cereal box lying open on the counter, a single house key on the floor. In the dining room, his light catches something scratched into the tabletop, rough and uneven. Some things don't stay buried. Boyd calls to his partner, voice tight. "You seen this?" The other officer joins him, eyes wide. "Kids playing a joke?" "Maybe," Boyd mutters, but he doesn't believe it. He scans the house again. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, no missing valuables. Bedrooms untouched. The kids' shoes lined up neatly by the door. Outside, the van sits quiet in the driveway, keys still in the ignition. The clock on the dashboard reads 10:52. Boyd switches off his flashlight. For a moment, the only sound is the soft whir of the fridge motor and the faint hum of streetlights outside. Then, something else. A creak. From beneath the floorboards. He crouches, ear to the ground. Silence. Just the house settling. That's what he tells himself as he stands again and pulls the report pad from his pocket. "Family of 4, he writes. No signs of struggle. Missing persons, probable voluntary departure." He hesitates before finishing the line, glancing once more at the scratched words on the table. Then he adds quietly, "Unexplained sound from below kitchen floor. The report will be filed, forgotten, lost in a move 2 years later. But the camera, the one that filmed the family's last drive, will resurface decades after, its final seconds restored frame by frame. And in that footage, just before the static returns, a reflection will flicker in the window glass behind Daniel Whitfield, someone standing inside the house, waiting. The sign for Marin Falls leaned like a tired secret, paint peeled by 2 decades of wind and indifference. Claire Hensley slowed as her rental car crested the final hill. The town spreading beneath her like a photograph bleached by time, rows of weathered brick storefronts. The old mill tower. A half-lit diner with a flickering open sign that had probably never turned off. The Whitfields had lived somewhere beyond that hill. 20 years ago, they had vanished between one heartbeat and the next, and Marin Falls had been trying to pretend it never happened ever since. Claire parked in front of the diner and killed the engine. She'd read every archived article, every police note that hadn't been misplaced. Officially, the case was still listed as voluntary disappearance. Unofficially, it had turned into folklore. Kids daring each other to knock on the Whitfield door, old-timers lowering their voices when the name came up. Inside, the diner smelled of coffee and rain. A ceiling fan turned lazily above cracked vinyl booths. The waitress, gray hair in a bun, name tag reading Lila, took one look at Claire's press badge and sighed like she'd been expecting it. "You're not the first to come sniffing around," she said, setting down a cup of coffee before Claire could ask. "You'll find what they all do. Nothing new." "I'm not chasing new," Claire said. 10 years ago, I missed a mother's last call. I'm here to get one thing right." Lila's hand hesitated on the pot. "Then you'll want Harlan Boyd." He was first on scene. Lives out by the river now, fishes more than he talks. Claire thanked her and left a generous tip. As she reached the door, Lila called after her, "Miss, don't go near that house after dark. Folks say the floors—" "Settle wrong." Claire smiled politely, but as she stepped into the drizzle, the comment stuck like a splinter. Harlan Boyd's ranch house sat beyond the edge of town, half swallowed by weeds. He opened the door before she could knock, a tall man in his 70s with shoulders still squared by habit. His badge hung framed above the mantel, tarnished but proud. "You're the reporter," he said flatly. "I'm an investigator," Claire said. "Independent, off payroll since the Grant case. We're revisiting unresolved disappearances. Your name keeps coming up." He studied her a moment, then opened the door wider. "Then you'd better come in." The living room was a museum of a life interrupted. Old case files stacked in boxes, faded photographs of search parties, a police radio still wired but long dead. Boyd poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed her one, and sat. "They were good folks," he began. "Daniel worked construction, Elaine taught part-time, no debts, no drama. Whole town swore they were perfect." He took a slow drink. "Nobody's perfect," Claire leaned forward. "You think someone in town was involved?" Boyd didn't answer right away. He reached for a folder on the coffee table, its edges soft with handling. Inside were copies of photos, crime scene stills, the house in disarray, the words carved into the table, "Some things don't stay buried." "I took those the first night," he said quietly. "Next morning, the department ordered them sealed. Said there was nothing criminal to see." "Who gave that order?" Boyd's eyes hardened. "Councilman Derry. Head of zoning back then. Owned half the land by Lake Marin, including the Whitfields' lot." Claire frowned. "Why would zoning care about a missing family?" He looked at her over the rim of his glass. "Because Daniel Whitfield was supposed to testify about construction permits the next week. Then he and his family were gone, and Derry's development project went through just fine. Rain started against the window, soft, persistent." Claire watched droplets race each other down the glass. "You think the Whitfields were silenced?" "I think they got in the way." He leaned back, weary. "When we searched the house, everything looked normal. Car in the drive, groceries on the counter. But there was one thing I couldn't explain." "What?" He hesitated. "A noise. Came from under the kitchen floor. Like an engine idling slow. We called in a contractor to check pipes, ducts, wiring. Nothing. Next day, the council shut us down. Said the property was under repair assessment." Claire flipped through the folder again. There's no record of that inspection. Because it never happened, Boyd said. They poured new concrete 2 weeks later. Claimed it was foundation repair. I tried to get a permit number. File was missing. Do you still have the house plans? He nodded toward a rolled tube leaning in the corner. Kept everything they told me to throw out. She picked it up carefully, unrolling it on the coffee table. The blueprints showed the kitchen's floor plan, neat lines and measurements, except one. Beneath the dining room, a faint square, hand-drawn in pencil. What's that? She asked. Boyd smiled grimly. The space we were told didn't exist. Back in her motel room that night, Claire laid out her notes beside her laptop. The ceiling buzzed with fluorescent light, the air thick with mildew. She opened her digital recorder. Interview 1, Harlan Boyd. States that officials intervened in early investigation. Mentions unauthorized repairs beneath Whitfield home. Evidence of missing inspection records. She stopped the recording. Her reflection in the dark laptop screen looked older than it should. Hair damp from rain, eyes carrying the kind of tired that never quite goes away. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A single message. Stop digging. She frowned, typing back, "Who is this?" No reply. Outside, thunder rolled low over the valley. For a moment she thought she heard something under it. A hum, deep and steady, like machinery turning far below the earth. She stepped to the window. The Whitfield house was just visible beyond the tree line, a silhouette against the pale flash of lightning. For an instant, she thought one window glowed faintly, warm, yellow, human. Then the light vanished. She rubbed her temples, whispering to herself, "You're chasing ghosts again." Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been standing inside that house, watching the storm. She set the camera on the nightstand, pointed at the window, and hit record. An instinct she couldn't explain. By morning she would check the footage and see nothing unusual, but the microphone would capture something she hadn't heard in the night. A soft creak, then a man's voice, barely audible through static. "Don't dig." Morning fog still clung to the valley when Claire parked at the edge of the Whitfield's old neighborhood. The cul-de-sac looked ordinary enough. Modest ranch houses, chain-link fences, the distant hum of lawn mowers, but every detail carried a strange tension, as though the street itself was holding its breath. She stood at the curb with her coffee, watching kids ride bicycles in lazy circles. They must have been born years after the Whitfields disappeared, but still their parents watched from porches, wary of a stranger with a press badge. Word always traveled fast in small towns, especially when old ghosts were stirred. Claire had arranged her first interviews for the day. The family's former neighbor, Nancy Corbett, and Gordon Derry, the retired councilman whose name Harlan Boyd had muttered the night before. She started with Nancy, the safe one. Nancy answered her door before Claire could knock, hair perfectly set, apron still tied. She'd been the type to know everyone's business, Claire thought, but not necessarily out of malice, more like a habit. "Oh, that poor family," Nancy said, ushering her inside. "I told the police back then it didn't make sense." Elaine was the kindest woman you could meet. Always baking for fundraisers. You don't just walk away from a life like that. You knew her well. Book club, church choir, PTA. Nancy frowned, but she'd changed that summer. She stopped coming to meetings, started keeping the blinds closed, said she was tired. I thought maybe marriage trouble. Claire noted the pause. Between her and Daniel? Nancy hesitated. He worked late a lot. Some nights his truck wasn't home until morning. Said he was on site at Lake Marin Estates, but Elaine told me she once drove out there with the kids and didn't see him. Did the police ask about that? They did. Nancy folded her hands, but that development was run by the town council, so everyone assumed Daniel was busy. Truth is, Elaine seemed scared of something. The last time I saw her, she said, "Some people build things to hide in, not live in." I never understood what she meant. At noon, Claire met Gordon Derry at the Marin Falls Country Club, the only place in town with new carpet. He arrived late, tan and polished, the kind of man who still called women Miss and believed charm could buy forgiveness. "Always good to see journalists still care about the past," he said, smiling thinly. "But I don't know what more I can add." That tragedy, if it even was one, happened long before my time. She placed a photocopy of Daniel Whitfield's testimony request form on the table between them. His signature glared up in blue ink. "You chaired the zoning committee in 1999. This hearing was scheduled for the week after the Whitfields vanished. You were going to question Daniel about fraudulent water permits." Derry's smile faltered. "I don't recall that. I have the agenda." He dabbed his mouth with a napkin. "Water rights were a mess back then. Old records, missing documents. You dig far enough, you'll find everyone guilty of something." Claire kept her voice even. "Detective Boyd said the council shut down excavation at the Whitfield home." Derry laughed softly. "Conspiracy theories. The county filled that foundation because it was unsafe." End of story. "Unsafe for whom?" He pushed back his chair. "Ms. Hensley, you'll find Marin Falls is built on rumor. Don't make yourself part of it." As he left, she noticed the tremor in his hand when he reached for his car keys. That evening, Claire returned to her motel with 2 hours of interview footage and more questions than answers. She spread photographs across the bedspread. The Whitfields at a barbecue, Elaine holding Sophie on her lap, Daniel standing stiffly beside them. He looked proud, almost defiant, like a man trying to prove he belonged. She flipped to another photo, a newspaper clipping from July 1999. "Local contractor wins city bid." Daniel again, shaking hands with Derry in front of a sign reading Lake Marin Estates. "Luxury living begins here." In the background of the picture, a construction vehicle loomed. Its side read, "Marin Concrete and Aggregate." The same company listed on the permit Boyd said had been lost. Claire zoomed in on the company logo. At the bottom, half obscured by shadow, was a phone number, only 3 digits visible. She checked Daniel's handwritten notes from the family's home movies. One page listed, "Call MCA, ask for Crow." The same word scrawled on the VHS tape Boyd had found under the Whitfield's floor. She replayed a section of the old home video. Pausing at the moment, Elaine turned the camera toward Daniel in the car. His expression wasn't just tired. It was frightened. His hand gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles went white. "Almost home," he'd said. Claire slowed the footage further. In the reflection of the rearview mirror, a second vehicle followed behind them, just visible for 3 frames before the tape cut out. A chill ran through her. She recorded her nightly log, voice steady though her stomach twisted. Interviews confirmed tension within the Whitfield family in the months before disappearance. Possible connection to Lake Marin Estates project and Councilman Derry. Evidence of surveillance. Unidentified vehicle following family before final footage ends. Next step, locate Marin Concrete employee known as Crow. She stopped the recorder. The motel's neon sign flickered through the blinds, washing the room in pulses of pink and blue. Claire opened her laptop to transcribe notes. Halfway through typing, she noticed something odd. The file folder labeled Interviews now had an extra subfolder titled Burial. She hadn't created it. She clicked, empty. Then the screen went black, and for half a second, white text flashed. "Stop digging." Her breath caught. The laptop rebooted normally, no trace of the message, but the warning felt heavier this time. Personal. She looked toward the dark window. The rain had stopped, and across the valley, the Whitfield house glimmered faintly in the distance, its porch light glowing for the first time in 20 years. Claire whispered to herself, half defiant, half terrified. Too late. Then she opened a new file and typed the words that would begin her next episode outline. Episode 2. The Perfect Family. Nothing perfect ever stays that way. Morning light hit Marin Falls like an old photograph left too long in the sun. Washed out, brittle, and still somehow beautiful. The town was already stirring when Claire parked at the end of Orchard View Lane, a stretch of cracked asphalt leading to the Whitfield house. It stood apart from the others, slightly uphill. Its siding faded to the color of bone. The curtains still hung in the windows, yellowed and stiff, and a realtor's lockbox dangled from the door handle, long rusted shut. The place hadn't been touched since the disappearance, preserved by fear and bureaucracy. Claire adjusted her camera harness, took a slow breath, and started rolling. June 12, 2024, she narrated quietly. Location: 14 Orchard View Lane, Marin Falls. This is the Whitfield residence, abandoned since 1999. I've obtained temporary access through county records, though officially the property remains under municipal hold. Her boots crunched on gravel as she moved toward the porch. The air smelled of wet earth and pine sap. Somewhere in the trees, a crow screamed. A long, hollow sound that sent a small shiver up her spine. The front door creaked open with minimal effort. Inside, the air was dense, tinged with mildew and something faintly metallic. Dust motes floated in the beam of her flashlight, turning lazily like snowflakes. The living room was almost intact, furniture draped in yellowing sheets, a clock frozen at 2:47. Children's drawings were still pinned to the refrigerator. Stick figures labeled Mommy, Daddy, Sophie, Ben. The ink had bled over time, the colors sinking into the paper like old wounds. She began her walkthrough, narrating each room for the camera. No forced entry, everything staged mid-life, keys, bills, a half-folded towel, then nothing. In the hallway, her light caught a faint scratch mark along the wall, 3 parallel grooves, low to the floor. Not random, intentional. She crouched, tracing them with her gloved finger. The grooves were shallow but deliberate, each about the length of a child's hand. Something shifted above her, wood settling maybe, but the sound made her look up sharply. Possible animal activity, she said aloud, her voice steadier than her pulse. She followed the hallway into the kitchen. It looked smaller than in the crime scene photos, claustrophobic. Ceiling warped from water damage. The floor tiles had been replaced in a crude patchwork pattern, a square section newer than the rest. That had to be where the repairs were done. Claire set her gear down and knelt. The seams around the tiles were uneven, and when she tapped the surface, it gave a faint, hollow echo. Her heart began to race. Boyd was right, she whispered. She reached for her crowbar, wedged it between 2 tiles, and pried. The adhesive cracked like brittle bone. Tile by tile, she worked methodically, revealing a rough patch of cement beneath. Then her tool hit something metallic, an old latch embedded flush with the surface. Jesus! She brushed away the dust and tugged. The latch resisted, then gave way with a rasping groan. Beneath it lay a wooden trap door, edges eaten by rot. A faint current of air breathed out, cold, damp, and unmistakably human in its staleness. Unrecorded subfloor chamber, estimated depth, unknown. Her flashlight beam cut into the dark void below. Stairs descended into earth, narrow and uneven, ending in blackness. For a long moment she just listened. There was a sound, faint but rhythmic, like distant dripping water. She descended. Each step moaned under her weight. The smell grew stronger, soil, rust, and something she couldn't name. The narrow stairwell opened into a small chamber. The walls were unfinished concrete, the air heavy with moisture. On one wall, a grid of metal shelves stood corroded with age. On them, dozens of glass jars filled with cloudy liquid. Inside each, something pale floated. Bone fragments, bits of fabric, feathers. She gagged and forced herself to keep filming. Possible evidence storage. Organic material preserved in fluid. Her light caught something on the far wall. Faint white paint spelling words across the concrete. She stepped closer. The orchard line. Her pulse spiked. The same phrase that had appeared in the family's last known voicemail transcript. Elaine's voice trembling. He said we'd end up part of the orchard line. Claire panned her camera slowly, documenting everything. The floor was packed dirt except for one corner where the soil had been disturbed. She knelt and brushed it away gently. Beneath was a small wooden box, its surface warped but intact. Under the photos sat an index card. 5 penciled coordinates matching the old irrigation grid. Holloway, 1954, smiling stiffly. 5 children in overalls, their names scribbled on the back. Holloway, 1954. Claire froze. The Holloway case. Another missing family. 5 cousins who had vanished 70 years ago. The air seemed to thicken. The jars, the writing, the buried box, these weren't remnants of one disappearance. They were linked. Footsteps creaked above. She killed the flashlight instinctively, heart hammering. A shadow moved across the slats of the trap door, then stopped. Silence. Then, the faintest scrape of metal. Her voice shook as she whispered into the recorder. Someone's in the house. The footsteps lingered for a moment longer, then faded. She waited, barely breathing before climbing back up. The kitchen was empty, but the front door now stood wide open, swinging gently in the breeze. On the counter lay a Polaroid that hadn't been there before. It showed her, crouched in the basement, flashlight in hand. Written across the bottom in thick marker, "Still digging." That night she drove straight to Harlan Boyd's ranch, the Polaroid trembling in her hands. He opened the door without a word, reading everything in her face before she spoke. They were connected, she said. The Whitfields, the Holloways. Same phrase, same sight. He studied the photograph, then looked up, eyes dark. Then you've stepped into something older than you realize. What do you mean? He motioned her inside. Back before the Holloways vanished, Marin Falls wasn't called that. It was Orchard Line Township, whole community built on apple fields owned by one man, Ezekiel Karn. When the soil started collapsing, folks said the roots went too deep, deeper than they should have. He paused. Karn's farm sat right where the Whitfield house stands now. Claire's throat went dry, and the phrase, "the orchard line?" Boyd exhaled slowly. Locals said it was where the trees and the people met the same end. Thunder rolled outside. Claire looked down at the Polaroid again. "Someone's trying to stop this from surfacing," she said. Boyd nodded grimly. "Then you'd best decide whether you're digging for truth or for your own grave." The next morning brought a heat that clung to the skin like a fever. Cicadas screamed in the oaks outside the Marin Falls Police Department as Claire stepped through the glass doors, her camera bag slung over her shoulder. She'd barely slept. Images of the jars, the Polaroid, the hand-scrawled words, the orchard line circling through her mind like a curse. Detective Marla Cates met her in the lobby. Late 30s, sharp jawline, eyes that had seen too much. Claire recognized the expression, curiosity warring with skepticism. "You're the documentary lady," Cates said. Boyd called. Said you found something that might reopen the Whitfield case. He left out the part about trespassing. Claire placed a sealed evidence bag on the desk. Inside was the Polaroid. "Someone was inside that house last night while I was downstairs. Took this of me. Left it behind." Kate studied the photo, her brow furrowing. "That's impossible. That property's been padlocked since 2005. The county owns it. Locks don't stop ghosts or people with keys." Kate sighed. "Follow me." The evidence room smelled of dust and formaldehyde. Cates unlocked a cabinet marked Archive, Whitfield/closed, and pulled out a stack of faded boxes. The case files looked as old as the town itself. Yellowed pages, brittle photographs, hand-typed reports. Claire watched as Kate laid them out. "Official line," Kate said, flipping through the first folder, "was that the Whitfields left voluntarily. No signs of struggle, no ransom, no bodies. But, unofficially, we all knew it stank." She slid a photograph across the table, an aerial shot of the house taken the week after the disappearance. The foundation repairs were visible, a rectangular patch darker than the surrounding soil. "That area you found under the kitchen," Kate said, "was poured by Marin Concrete. Company folded in 2001, right after the investigation stopped." Claire leaned closer. "The owner?" Kate hesitated, then read from an old note. "Crow and Son Excavation, subsidiary of Marin Concrete. Address, Old Orchard Road." The same word that had haunted every piece of this story. By noon, they were driving along a back road lined with wild apple trees gone feral. The GPS lost signal a mile back. The old sign at the curve read, "Crow and Son, closed since 2001. Trespassers prosecuted." The property was a skeletal ruin. Rusted cranes, cement mixers, half-collapsed sheds. A faded mural on one wall showed a line of trees heavy with fruit, and beneath it, the company motto, "What's buried keeps us standing." Claire shivered. Inside the main warehouse, sunlight filtered through holes in the roof, casting gold shafts over piles of discarded equipment. At the far end stood a metal door marked Archives. Kate forced it open with a crowbar. The room beyond was cold, the air still. File cabinets lined both walls, drawers labeled with dates and project numbers. One cabinet had been welded shut. Kate knelt, examining the welds. Somebody wanted this sealed permanent. Or protected, Claire murmured. They pried until the welds cracked. Inside lay a collection of manila folders wrapped in plastic. The first bore the heading Lake Marin Estates, 1999. The second, Orchard Line Development, 1954. Kate opened the older one. Blueprints spilled out. Plans for underground irrigation tunnels, far deeper than agricultural needs required. Scribbled in pencil along one margin was a list of names. At the bottom, Holloway, times 5. "Dear God," Kate whispered. "These were people." Claire lifted another sheet. It showed the same orchard layout, but each tree symbol was paired with a set of coordinates and initials. A map of burials disguised as irrigation lines. "They didn't vanish," she said. "They're vent caps, 5 per generation. Seal them and you buy decades. Crack one and the stress runs the line." Back at the police station, the heat had broken into a thunderstorm. Sheets of rain lashed the windows as Kate called the state crime lab. Within hours, the orchard site was declared a crime scene. Claire stood by the window, watching lightning flash over the valley. Who would do this? Why bury them like that? And why start again with the Whitfields? Kate rubbed her temples. Maybe someone wanted to keep the tradition alive. Some sick inheritance, an inheritance. Claire repeated, like a family business. They looked at each other, the realization forming simultaneously. Crow and Son. Kate pulled the license files. Owner, Ezekiel Crow. Born 1921. Died, wait. She blinked. No record of death. The son, Harold Crow, moved to Marin Falls in 1978. Started Marin Concrete 2 decades later. Claire felt the chills settle through her. The Whitfields' house sits right where Ezekiel's original orchard did. Kate nodded slowly. The orchard line never stopped. It just changed hands. Night settled thick and dark by the time Claire returned to her motel. She tried to edit footage, but her thoughts kept circling the same image. The map of trees, each one marking a grave. Thunder rumbled again, closer this time. The lights flickered. On instinct, she checked her camera. The one she'd left recording during the day in the police station, mostly background B-roll. When she played it back, the feed jittered with static. For a few seconds, nothing but noise. Then a single frame appeared, someone standing in the hallway behind her and Kate's during the archive search. A tall man in overalls, face blurred by motion. In his hand, something glinted, a metal hook or latch. The frame vanished before she could freeze it. She sat in silence, pulse hammering. The camera had caught what her eyes hadn't. Outside, the storm reached its peak. A gust slammed the motel door open, scattering papers across the floor. Claire rushed to close it and froze. Lying on the threshold was an apple, fresh, red, glistening with rain. A small tag was tied to its stem with twine. 14 Orchard View Lane. Tomorrow, midnight. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. The scent was sweet, metallic, unmistakably the same as the air in the crawl space. She whispered into her recorder, voice barely audible. "They want me back at the house." Lightning flared across the valley, and for a heartbeat, the silhouette of the Whitfield home appeared in the distance, a dark crown of branches bending above it. When the light faded, the valley went black again. But somewhere out there, faint and deliberate, came the echo of a shovel striking soil. Midnight came with fog thick enough to erase the road. Claire's headlights carved tunnels through it, the asphalt glistening like a black river. The apple sat on the passenger seat beside her, its tag fluttering faintly with each bump. She'd thought of ignoring the message. She wasn't that reckless. But curiosity and fear made a language she couldn't stop translating. She parked at the base of the hill, engine idling. The Whitfield house loomed ahead, half-eaten by mist. A cold LED work light burned on the porch, an extension cord snaking to a humming generator in the trees. She switched on her body cam and spoke softly. June 13th, 2024, returning to 14 Orchard View Lane per anonymous tip. If anything happens, this recording goes to Detective Cates. The wind carried the smell of rain and clay. She climbed the steps slowly, each one sighing under her boots. The front door was ajar, the same way she'd left it, but the Polaroid from the counter was gone. Inside, the air was colder than before, damp enough to cling to her throat. Her flashlight swept over the kitchen. A skim of fresh leveling compound glazed the patch, thin-set lines still wet. The trapdoor seemed neatly troweled over. "Impossible," she murmured. A low hum vibrated through the floor, faint but constant. The same noise Boyd had described. She crouched, pressing her palm against the tiles. Warmth pulsed beneath her hand, steady, rhythmic, almost alive. She turned the camera toward herself, voice trembling. "The subfloor has been resealed within the last 24 hours. There's movement or machinery operating below." A sudden creak behind her made her whirl. The hallway light flickered, then steadied. A silhouette stood at the far end, half hidden in the doorway. Male, tall, still. "Hello?" No answer. She stepped forward, the camera shaking slightly. The figure turned and slipped through the adjoining room. Claire followed, heart pounding, but when she entered the living room, it was empty. Only the curtains stirred, though the windows were shut. Then her foot hit something. She looked down. A set of muddy boot prints tracked across the rug, fresh, leading toward the basement door that had once been nailed shut. The nails were gone now. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the walls. Claire switched to her night lens and pulled the door open. Stale air rolled up like a sigh. "If anyone's down there, identify yourself." Nothing. She started down, one cautious step at a time. The basement was unfinished, just bare studs and a concrete floor. Water dripped somewhere unseen. Her light caught something new, a wide crack running along the far wall. The edges were sharp, clean, recent. From within came a faint draft, cool and wet. She knelt, shining the light inside. The crack widened into a narrow fissure, leading deeper into the earth. the walls lined with what looked like concrete support ribs. She realized what she was seeing. Another passage, older than the house itself. "Undocumented tunnel discovered beneath foundation," she whispered. She leaned closer. Inside the fissure, the air shimmered faintly, like heat over asphalt. And then softly, she heard it. A whisper. A child's voice. "Mom?" Claire froze. The voice came again, faint but clear. "Mom, are we going home now?" Claire's pulse spiked. She swept the light through the fissure, nothing but darkness and dirt. The sound hadn't come from her recorder. It was in the air, alive. She reached out, pressing her gloved fingers against the edge. The soil shifted slightly under her touch. Then something cold brushed her knuckle from the other side. Soft, quick, gone. She stumbled back, breath catching. "There's someone in there," she whispered. The hum deepened, almost a growl. Dust fell from the ceiling in soft bursts, each one matching the rhythm beneath the floor. She steadied the camera, pointing it at the fissure, and began to film. Suddenly, the wall gave way. A section of concrete cracked open, spilling dirt and roots. Through the haze, a small object rolled out, a child's shoe, scuffed and half-decayed, its laces tied neatly. Claire knelt, trembling hands lifting it into the light. The size, the age, it could only have belonged to Sophie Whitfield. She whispered into her mic, voice shaking. "Recovered artifact consistent with victim age. Suggests burial chamber beyond foundation." Then the hum stopped. Complete silence. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Then, slowly, she heard another sound, a soft series of clicks, like boots on tile. Footsteps above, moving across the kitchen, deliberate and slow. Her radio hissed with static, then a voice. "Claire, it's Kate's." "Where are you?" She exhaled in relief and hit transmit. "I'm at the Whitfield house." "I found—" The line cut to dead air. A low creak echoed from the stairs behind her. Someone was descending. The beam of her flashlight caught a man's leg, a flash of denim, the glint of metal at his side. "Detective Cates?" she called. No answer. The figure stopped halfway down. Then, in the silence, he spoke. Calm, measured, and wrong. "You shouldn't have come back." Her flashlight trembled. "Who are you?" He stepped closer. The light hit his face, creased skin, grizzled beard, eyes like polished stone. He looked older than time, his features worn into something that might have once been kindness. "We keep the ground from taking the rest," he said. "That's the work." Not pretty, necessary. She recognized him from the photo in the police archive. Harold Crow, founder of Marin Concrete. "But you're dead?" He smiled faintly. "Not yet. Not while the line still grows." He raised the metal tool in his hand. A concrete trowel, its edge dulled with rust. "You can film all you like, but stories end the same way foundations do, sealed." The hum started again, so loud it rattled her ribs. Claire swung the camera toward him, light flaring. Then the feed cut to black. When Claire woke, the first thing she felt was weight, the kind that came from Earth pressing close on all sides. Her throat ached. Her wrists burned against the zip ties holding them behind her. It was black down there, but the air moved faintly, carrying a smell she recognized at once. Wet soil and cement dust. Her camera was gone, but the small recorder on her lapel still blinked red. She forced her voice low, steady. June 14th, 2024. Location unknown. Possible substructure beneath the Whitfield property. I'm alive. Something dripped in the darkness, regular as a metronome. She inched sideways until her shoulder brushed cold metal. A ladder bolted into concrete. The wall curved outward. She was in some kind of cylindrical shaft. A whisper of light appeared above. Amber, swinging. Footsteps followed. She froze. The light descended slowly, and then Harold Crow's voice echoed down the shaft. "You dig long enough, Miss Hensley. You stop asking what's under the dirt. You start asking why it's still breathing." He stopped a few rungs above her, lantern haloing his face. The air shimmered with heat. "What is this place?" she demanded. He smiled faintly. "Everything the town is built on. The first pour." He cut the zip ties with a pocket knife and gestured upward. "Climb." "Time you saw the foundation." Claire hesitated, then obeyed. Anything to get out of the hole. The shaft opened into a vast chamber lined with concrete arches. The walls were slick with condensation, shot through with roots that pulsed like veins. A diesel genset coughed to life in an equipment bay, its three-phase feed waking dead panel meters one by one. Crow set the lantern on a ledge. "This started before my father, before the Holloways, before the Whitfields. My family poured these walls when the town still called itself Orchard Line. They said we were preserving history. Truth is, we were burying mistakes." He walked to a series of sealed alcoves, each marked with a number. "The soil collapses here. Old minds, old bodies, same difference. If you don't seal them, the past keeps rising. So we built vaults, poured new foundations. Every time the ground gave, another family disappeared." Claire's stomach twisted. "You killed them." He turned, eyes calm. "No, I kept them from taking the rest of the town with them. You think concrete is murder? It's mercy." She stepped back. "And the Whitfields?" Crow looked toward the nearest wall. "Daniel was going to expose us. He wanted the permits public. The night he came here, he brought his wife and kids, said he'd show them what we'd hidden. He didn't understand that once you open the line, you can't leave it half sealed." He touched the wall. A deep groan rippled through the floor, like the earth exhaling. "It's awake again," he said quietly. "And now it's yours to finish." Claire backed toward the ladder, heart pounding. "I'm not part of this." Crow's smile was tired. "You already are." "You broke the seal." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small reel of film. "Daniel left this the night he died. Said someone should remember the truth. You wanted a story. Here it is." He tossed it to her. The canister clattered across the floor. She snatched it up. "I'll take this to the police." "They won't hear you," he said. "Kate's already called." Her line's dead. The storm cut power hours ago. The hum rose again, shaking dust from the ceiling. One of the concrete arches cracked open, releasing a gush of cold air that smelled of apples and rot. In the lantern light she saw outlines, shapes suspended in the wall itself. Hands, faces, half-formed in the cement like fossils. Crow turned away. "The line keeps growing, whether we want it or not." "Then stop it." He shook his head. "You stop it by finishing the cap. Open the manifold, flood the heart. Any hand can do it. Only a willing one will." Before she could reply, a thunderous crash echoed from above, the house collapsing inward. Dust rained down the shaft. Crow looked up, then at her. "Too late," he whispered. "It's breaking through." He pressed the lantern into her hands. "Run!" The floor split behind him with a roar. Claire stumbled back as a fissure opened, swallowing him in a rush of soil and light. The lantern shook violently. For an instant she saw his face lit from below, eyes wide, not in fear, but in relief. Before the earth closed over him, silence followed. Then a new sound, the crackle of her recorder still pinned to her shirt. She lifted it, voice shaking. "Subject Harold Crow presumed deceased, substructure collapsing, attempting egress." She climbed the ladder, lungs burning, until she reached a narrow hatch leading to the crawl space. The trapdoor above her had caved in, moonlight streaming through a gap in the floorboards. She crawled out into the ruined kitchen. The house was sinking, walls bending inward as if drawn toward the hole beneath. Outside, sirens wailed, Kate's and her team. Claire staggered to the porch, shouting for help. When she looked back, the house groaned one final time and folded in on itself, vanishing into a plume of dust. She clutched the film reel to her chest. Behind her, Detective Cates reached the yard, eyes wide. What happened? Claire turned, shaking. It wasn't just the Whitfields. It's the whole town. The ground under their feet trembled softly, rhythmically, as if something vast below was still breathing. The storm passed by dawn, leaving the sky the color of wet slate. Smoke still curled from where the Whitfield house had collapsed, the air thick with dust and the smell of concrete and burned wood. Claire sat on the tailgate of an ambulance, a blanket around her shoulders, her hand still gripping the 16mm film reel. It was cold, solid, real. The only piece of truth she had left. Detective Cates crouched beside her, bruised and hollow-eyed. "You're sure Crow's dead?" "He fell in," Claire said quietly. "The ground took him." Cates exhaled, staring toward the smoldering crater. "Half the foundation caved into some kind of shaft. We've got engineers coming, but Christ, Claire, you're lucky to be alive." Claire turned the reel in her hands. "He said Daniel left this the night he died. Then we need to see what's on it." The police lab in Springfield still smelled faintly of ammonia and film developer. An old technician named Riley Denton agreed to help. Intrigued by the mystery more than the paycheck, he threaded the reel through the projector, muttering to himself as the light flickered to life. The first frame appeared. A timestamp. June 3rd, 1999, 9:42 p.m. Daniel Whitfield stood in what looked like the basement of his home, sweat on his brow, camera shaking slightly. The background noise was a steady hum, faint but unmistakable. Daniel, on film. "Elaine, if you're watching this, something's wrong at the site. They're pouring without permits, sealing something that isn't supposed to be there. I tried to tell Derry. He said if I keep talking, we'll end up in the line. I don't know what that means." He paused, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Behind him, a second figure moved. Elaine, holding Sophie on her hip. Her voice trembled. "Elaine. Danny, stop! They're outside." He turned the camera, catching a flash of headlights through a basement window. Then the frame jolted, showing him pulling a wooden box from behind the furnace. "Daniel, if we don't make it, whoever finds this, look under the dining room. That's where I hid the records. Don't let them pour." The floor static burst across the film, then cleared. The final image showed Daniel standing in the same spot, hours later, his expression hollow. He whispered something the microphone barely caught. "The line's not just concrete. It's people." Then the reel burned out, melting in the projector gate. The smell of scorched celluloid filled the room. Claire sat frozen, her pulse in her throat. "They killed him because he found out what they were building," she said softly. Cates nodded grimly. "And they buried his whole family in the same foundation." Riley ejected the melted film, shaking his head. "This footage is unstable. I'll digitize, and for the record, load follows the tunnels, 5 vents per generation. Cap them. You buy 30, maybe 40 years. Crack one, the stress migrates along the grid." "Do it," Claire said. "Every second counts." That night, she and Cates drove back to Marin Falls. The town looked smaller than ever. Half the streets still cordoned off. The remaining residents gathered in the church parking lot under emergency lights. Rumors spread like smoke. Sinkholes, gas leaks, earthquakes. None of them close to the truth. Cates parked by the old orchard road. "We'll need to evacuate if the ground keeps shifting. The geologists think there's a network of caverns under the valley. Could go for miles." Claire watched the horizon. The soil shimmered faintly, the same rhythmic pulse she'd felt under the kitchen tiles. "It's spreading," she said. "What is?" "The line." At the station, Riley called with an update. You'll want to see this." They hurried back to Springfield. On his monitor, the digitized film played in silence, but there was more this time. After Daniel's last words, a few recovered frames flickered. The image showed a concrete chamber, smooth, wet, newly poured. The camera panned slowly until a reflection appeared in the liquid surface. 4 figures, Daniel, Elaine, Sophie, and Jack, standing hand in hand. Kate's whispered, "He filmed them inside." "No," Claire said, her voice low. "He filmed what came after." The footage trembled, the reflection rippled, distorting. A 5th shape appeared behind them, tall, indistinct, holding a lantern. Then the screen cut to black. Riley leaned back, pale. "Whatever that is, it's burned into the film emulsion. Could be double exposure, could be light damage." But Claire knew better. The same lantern Crow had carried. The same symbol she'd seen etched into the concrete walls. That night, power failed across the valley. The only light came from generator lamps and the occasional flicker of lightning far off the ridge. Claire stood by her car, laptop balanced on the hood, uploading the Whitfield footage to every news outlet she could reach. Halfway through, her screen glitched, then froze. The upload stalled at 99%. A new file appeared on the desktop, foundation.mp4. Her pulse spiked. She hadn't created that file. She clicked. The video opened on a static shot of the Whitfield basement, filmed from an angle she didn't recognize. The floor was sealed again, pristine concrete. Then the camera panned to the corner, and there she was, asleep on the ambulance tailgate, filmed from behind. The timestamp read 20 minutes ago. Her throat went dry. Someone was still filming her. "Kate!" she shouted. The detective ran over, hand on her holster. Claire turned the laptop toward her, but the screen had gone black. Only one line of white text remained. "Finish the pour." The ground trembled again, harder this time. Sirens wailed as a section of Main Street collapsed, swallowing 3 parked cars whole. The heartbeat under the soil quickened. Kate's grabbed Claire's arm. "We need to get out of town." Claire shook her head. "If we leave it, it'll spread." Crow said it needed to be sealed. "That's the only way it stops." "With what?" "Concrete." Kate's blinked at her. "You're suggesting we pour an entire valley." "No," Claire said. "Just the primary chamber under 14 Orchard View. 4 mixers give approximately 32 cubic yards, enough to cap a 12 by 12 by 6. Void. They drove to the ruins of the Whitfield property, headlights cutting through the dust. The crater where the house once stood now pulsed with light from below. Soft gold, breathing in time with the tremors. Trucks from the highway construction site waited nearby, abandoned mid-shift. Their drums still held wet cement. Claire jumped out before Kate's could stop her, running to the edge of the crater. The heat rising from it shimmered, distorting her reflection in the air. She shouted into the void. "You wanted to keep her, fine. You can have one." The ground answered with a low, aching hum. Cracks spidered out from her feet, glowing faintly like veins of molten glass. Kate's climbed out of the car, yelling over the noise. "Claire, stop!" Claire grabbed one of the trucks, turned the mixer lever, and watched the gray slurry begin to pour, spilling down into the crater like liquid stone. The fumes were choking, the heat unbearable. The hum climbed to a roar. Steam belched as the slurry hit warm stone. Calcium burn stung her eyes while the cap took. For an instant, she saw silhouettes in it. Faces, dozens of them, mouths open as if singing. The Holloways, the Whitfields, and Crow, standing among them, lantern raised. Then everything went silent. When the light faded, the crater had sealed smooth. The hum was gone. Claire stood trembling on the new concrete surface, dust swirling around her. Kate's joined her slowly, flashlight trembling in her hand. "Did it work?" she asked. Claire looked down. The concrete was already hardening. In the center, faintly etched by the last of the heat, 4 words gleamed before vanishing into gray. Some things don't stay buried. Morning came quietly, almost unnaturally so. The air in Marin Falls no longer pulsed or vibrated. It just sat there, heavy and still, as though the entire valley was holding its breath. Claire stood at the ridge again, watching the mist rise over what had once been the Whitfield property. From this distance, the new layer of concrete looked calm, like a fresh scar still pink from the wound beneath. Nothing moved. No more tremors, no light. Detective Cates joined her, 2 mugs of gas station coffee in hand. "State crews are calling it a geological event," she said, handing one to Claire. "They're sending geologists and PR teams, not rescue units. Official word is, an underground collapse stabilized by natural sediment shift." Claire took the cup. It trembled slightly in her grip. "And the film?" "Leaked everywhere," Cates said. "Half the country's seen Daniel Whitfield's message by now. The governor's office wants to talk to you, on camera." Claire stared at the valley. "If they think I'm going to say this was a sinkhole, they're wrong." "You tell them the truth, and they'll lock you up for obstruction of something," Cates said, taking a long sip. "I've already been warned off the case. They're sending it federal." Claire almost laughed. "Federal? They'll build a fence, bury it again, call it clean." Cates didn't argue. She didn't need to. They both knew that was exactly what would happen. By noon, Marin Falls was crawling with government vehicles, trucks with unmarked plates, men in plain clothes. They erected portable fencing around the Whitfield site, hammered up signs that read "Restricted Area," "Environmental Risk." Claire watched from the diner window. Her phone buzzed every few minutes with reporters, podcasters, even strangers offering her money for interviews. She ignored them all. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with a smoker's voice, refilled her coffee and said, "Heard you were the one who found the old film." Claire nodded absently. "You know," the woman said, "my grandma used to talk about that family. The Whitfields. Said she'd see them sometimes in the orchard after they disappeared, walking like shadows between the trees. Folks thought she was losing her mind." Claire looked up. "When did she die?" 1959. The words hit harder than expected. That was before the Whitfields vanished, before Daniel even existed. Claire said quietly, "What was your grandmother's name?" The woman frowned, trying to remember. Clara Derry." Claire's heart stopped. Derry. The name from Daniel's recording. The man he warned about. "Derry said we'll end up in the line." "Do you still have anything of hers?" Claire asked quickly. "Photos? Letters?" The waitress blinked, caught off guard. "A box in the attic, I think." "Why?" "Please," Claire said. "I need to see them." They drove out to a small house near the north edge of town. The attic smelled like cedar and dust, filled with trunks of old Christmas decorations and moth-eaten quilts. The waitress, whose name Claire learned was Marla Derry, pulled down a cardboard box marked Family 1940s to 60s. Inside were dozens of black and white photos. One in particular stopped Claire cold. A company picnic, 1954. A group of workers in hard hats standing by a banner that read, "Orchard Line Construction Company." In the front row stood a man with Daniel Whitfield's eyes. Same build, same crooked smile. But the photo was dated June 1954. "Marla?" Claire whispered. "Do you know who this is?" She shrugged. "That's my granddad, Thomas Derry. Worked for the company that built half the valley." "Why?" Claire stared at the photo. Behind the group of men stood 5 children, arranged neatly, like a family portrait. 4 boys, 1 girl. Each wore the same small pendant shaped like an apple blossom. On the back of the photo, written in faded pen, "The Orchard Line. The Chosen 5. Her mouth went dry. "Marla, who are the kids?" Marla frowned. "Just the owner's kids, I think. Why? Because they looked exactly like the Whitfield children. Every feature, the hair, the eyes, the faint scar above the eldest boy's brow. But that wasn't possible. The Whitfields hadn't been born for another 40 years. That night, Claire sat alone in her motel room, staring at the photo under the desk lamp. The reflection in the glossy paper seemed to shift under the light, the faces warping slightly. For a moment, she thought she saw movement, a blink, a subtle turn of the head. She rubbed her eyes hard. Lack of sleep, she told herself. Shock, trauma. But when she looked again, the children's faces were all turned toward her. The photo slipped from her hand. A knock at the door made her jump. "Claire!" It was Kate's. Claire opened the door, trying to compose herself. "You shouldn't be here." "They pulled the concrete core samples," Kate said. "You were right." Claire's pulse quickened. "What did they find?" Kate's hesitated, then handed over a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a small, corroded pendant shaped like an apple blossom. "They found this 12 feet down," she said. "Same as the necklaces in your photo." Claire stared at it, her breath shallow. "They're not Whitfields," she whispered. "They're the ones before." Kate's frowned. "Before what?" "Before all of it. The orchard line, the wells, the disappearances. It's the same pattern repeating itself. 5 kids every generation. The families change, the names change. But the faces?" She trailed off, looking back at the photo on the desk. The 5 children stared out from the paper like a reflection trapped in time. Kate's crossed her arms. "If what you're saying is true, then whoever's behind this isn't gone." "They're still building." Claire nodded slowly. "And I think I know where the next pour will be." Outside, thunder rolled again over the ridge. But this time, the rumble wasn't from the sky. It came from below, faint and steady, like something old waking up after a long sleep. Claire turned toward the valley. The lights of Marin Falls flickered, one row at a time, tracing the same straight lines that had once split the earth. The heartbeat had returned. Rain slicked the roads in long silver streaks, and the orchard on the north side of Marin Falls glistened under flashes of lightning. The trees were mostly dead now, their trunks warped, bark cracked like old leather. In the distance, floodlights from the federal crews still burned around the Whitfield site, but here, half a mile away, the valley was dark, untouched. Claire parked at the edge of the orchard, headlights off, and stepped out into the wet grass. Detective Cates followed, flashlight in one hand, pistol in the other. "If someone sees us out here, we'll both be arrested," she muttered. "They can arrest me later," Claire said. "We need to see what's under this ground before they bury it again." The map she'd made from the photograph lay folded in her jacket pocket. The children in the 1954 image hadn't just posed for a picture. They'd formed a pattern. When she traced their positions and matched them to the orchard layout, the points lined up perfectly with the 5 sealed wells Father Everett had mentioned. The first line of the orchard wasn't a company name. It was a literal line, a network connecting those wells beneath the valley. They walked between the trees until Claire stopped, shining her light down on a circle of flattened soil. A faint ring of rusted metal peeked through the mud. "There," she whispered. The old well cap was bolted shut with corroded iron, half buried under decades of silt. Kates knelt beside her, testing one of the bolts with a wrench. It didn't move. "It's fused." "We'd need cutting tools." Claire handed her a crowbar from the trunk. "Then we pry." It took nearly 15 minutes of struggling before the cap broke free with a screech of rust. A foul breath of air rushed up from the darkness below, cold, metallic, almost sweet. Kates gagged. "Smells like old blood." Claire aimed her flashlight down the shaft. Wooden rungs descended into blackness, slick with moisture. At the bottom, maybe 20 feet down, something glimmered. An old brass plate set into the wall. I'm going, she said. Hell you are, Kate said, grabbing her arm. We don't know if that ladder's stable. I have to, Claire insisted. That photograph wasn't just a warning, it's a map. We need proof. Before Kate could argue, Claire started down. The metal was slippery, and the air grew colder with each rung. Her flashlight beam bounced off the wet walls, illuminating veins of concrete that looked too smooth, too recent. Someone had reinforced the well decades after it was abandoned. At the bottom, her boots sank into shallow water. She waded toward the brass plate and wiped the grime away. The inscription was nearly gone, but a few words remained. Orchard, line 1. Foundation. Begun. June 1954. Claire's breath fogged in the beam of her light. 1954. The same year 5 children vanished. She turned and saw that the tunnel extended sideways, a low passage carved into the rock and lined with concrete. The water there rippled gently, as if something had just moved. Claire, Kate called from above. You okay? Yeah, Claire answered, though her voice trembled. There's a tunnel. It goes under the orchard. Don't go alone. But she was already moving. The passage sloped downward, and the smell grew worse. Rot and earth and something faintly chemical. Her flashlight flickered, then steadied. The walls were covered in markings, etched deep into the concrete. At first, she thought they were random scratches, but when she leaned closer, she saw names. Hundreds of them, carved in a steady hand. Whitfield Crow, Barrett Holloway. The same families that had vanished across generations. Her light caught something at the end of the tunnel. A door of rusted steel with a circular emblem in its center, a stylized apple blossom. Beneath it, faint words read, "The roots shall rise." Claire touched the emblem. It was warm, pulsing faintly. A hum filled the air, deep and low, like a heartbeat muffled by stone. Above her, Kate shouted something, but the sound was drowned out by the vibration beneath her feet. The tunnel walls trembled, small stones raining down. Claire stumbled backward as cracks spread across the door. A line of light split the metal, widening like a wound. Water gushed through, freezing cold, knocking her off her feet. She clawed for the ladder but couldn't reach it. The flood carried her deeper into the tunnel until her shoulder slammed against a support beam. Then, silence. When she looked up, she saw them. 5 figures standing in the water, motionless. Children, their faces pale, eyes dark as coal. They wore the same pendant she'd seen in the photo. One of them stepped forward. The smallest girl. Her voice was a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Close the roots. Claire froze. What does that mean? The girl tilted her head. Expression unreadable. The roots feed on memory. You woke us when you broke the line. I didn't. 5 caps hold a line, the girl whispered. Break 1, take 5. Behind her, the others began to move, their reflections flickering in the water like candlelight. Claire stumbled back until her shoulder hit the tunnel wall. You're not real, she whispered. You're. Kate's flashlight beam cut through the darkness from above. Claire, grab my hand. Claire blinked, and the children were gone. Only ripples remained in the black water. She waded toward the ladder, lungs burning, and climbed until Kate caught her wrist and pulled her up onto the surface. They collapsed onto the wet ground, gasping. What the hell happened? Kate demanded. Claire just shook her head. They're down there, she whispered. The first 5, the Orchard Line kids. Kate looked toward the well, which now shuddered faintly. A dull light glowed from below, soft and rhythmic. What did they say? Claire swallowed hard. They said it's not finished. Back in the car, dripping and shaking, Claire spread the photo out on the dashboard again. The 5 children's faces seemed sharper now, eyes wide and knowing. Around the edges of the photo, something new had appeared. tiny hairline cracks forming a pattern. A map. The next location glowed faintly under the flashlight. The elementary school, built on orchard soil in 1984. Kate stared at it, realization dawning. They built the school right over one of the wells. Claire nodded. And if the pattern repeats, 5 more will vanish. Outside, thunder rolled again. The orchard's dead trees swayed as if to some hidden rhythm. Beneath the soil, the heartbeat grew stronger, and for the first time since the ceiling, the concrete over the Whitfield site cracked. A single, perfect line. The Marin Falls Elementary School sat at the end of an overgrown drive, its playground half swallowed by weeds. The sign out front still read, "Home of the Foxes," but the paint had peeled until the letters bled into each other. Claire and Kate stood at the gate under their flashlights, rain whispering on their jackets. "District closed it 10 years ago," Kate said. "Mold and foundation issues." "Guess we know what kind of foundation they meant." Claire nodded toward the dark windows. "The map from the photo ends here, 5th point. The pattern finishes at this building." Kate's pushed the gate open. The hinges groaned. "We make it quick." In and out inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint sweet sour smell of decay. Posters of smiling children still hung on the hallway walls, their faces faded to gray. Claire's flashlight beam caught the gym scoreboard, still showing a frozen tie game. Every sound they made came back in an echo that didn't sound quite right, as if something else were breathing it in and giving it back. They followed the hallway until they reached a classroom at the far end, room 105, the children's room. The door hung open. Inside, 5 tiny desks sat in a row, untouched, their surfaces coated in years of grime. A banner above the chalkboard read, "Plant good seeds, cover what's left." Kate muttered, "Jesus." Claire knelt by one of the desks. A child's drawing was still there, the paper glued to the wood by moisture. She peeled it loose carefully. 5 stick figures holding hands beneath an apple tree. Beneath them, in shaky crayon, "We stay down." Her voice trembled. "They were here." Kate pointed to the floor. The linoleum bulged upward in a neat oval, as if something beneath it had swelled. She drew her knife and pried at the edge. The tile cracked, revealing concrete underneath, smooth, gray, and new. Claire crouched beside her. "Look at the seams. It's the same pour style as the Whitfield house, meaning there's a chamber under it, meaning they built the school on another vault." They worked silently, prying until the last piece came free. Beneath it was a narrow metal hatch, marked with the same apple blossom emblem. Kate's ran a gloved finger over the symbol. Whoever did this wasn't hiding their work. They were signing it. A faint tapping echoed from below. Once, twice, 5 times. Kate's flinched. "Tell me that's pipes." "It's not pipes," Claire whispered. The tapping came again, louder this time, followed by a low hum that made the desks tremble. Claire steadied her flashlight on the hatch. Dust fell from the ceiling in fine streams. "It's waking up." Kate's grabbed her radio. "Dispatch, this is Detective Kate's. We need backup at—" The line hissed into static. The hum deepened, pulsing through the floor like a heartbeat. Claire's flashlight flickered, then died. Darkness folded over them. "Kate, I'm here." Her voice was thin, tight. "Claire, we need to get out." But the hatch clicked. Slowly, the bolts rotated on their own, turning counterclockwise, one after another, like invisible hands working the lock. The hum stopped. Silence filled the room so completely it rang in Claire's ears. Then, a voice. Not from above, not from below, but inside the walls. "Finish the orchard." The same child's whisper. The hatch lifted with a metallic sigh. Cold air breathed up from the dark. Kate's leveled her flashlight into the opening. "God help me!" Below, the chamber glowed with a faint golden light. The floor wasn't dirt or stone, but roots. Thick, pale, intertwined like veins. And between them, she saw small shapes half swallowed by the growth. Toys, shoes, bones. Claire forced herself closer, camera shaking in her hands. "They planted them," she murmured. "They turned the missing into the roots." Kate stepped back, voice hoarse. "We scope it first, then get state DEM to authorize a controlled cap." "No," Claire said. "We show the world." The hum returned, louder. The roots began to move, twisting like living things, stretching toward the opening. Claire stumbled back as one brushed her boot. It was warm, pulsing faintly. The air filled with a sound like breathing. Kate's fired once into the hatch. The bullet struck concrete and ricocheted, the flash lighting a dozen faces pressed beneath the translucent roots. Children's faces, eyes open, mouths forming a single word. "Stay!" Kate grabbed Claire by the arm. "Run!" They bolted down the hallway as the floor heaved behind them, tiles buckling upward. The hum became a roar. Lockers burst open, papers swirling like leaves. A crack tore through the length of the corridor, chasing them toward the exit. They burst through the front doors just as the ground erupted. A wave of dust and soil swept across the playground, scattering debris. When the air cleared, the school was half gone. Its far wings sunk into the earth, its windows glowing faintly from within. Kate leaned on the hood of the car, coughing. "We can't stop it. The line's awake for good." Claire stared at the collapsed building, chest heaving. "Then we find the heart. The heart, the first root. Whatever Crow sealed in the beginning, it's still down there. It's what keeps feeding this Kate's turn to her. And if we dig that up," Claire met her gaze, "then maybe we finally bury it right." The sirens were coming again, echoing through the valley. Claire looked once more at the cracked playground, the faint golden light seeping through the soil. The heartbeat continued, softer now, slower, as if the town itself were waiting. The night air was heavy with ash and ozone as Claire and Kate drove toward the ridge. The valley below pulsed faintly, fissures glowing like veins beneath a translucent skin. The radio had long gone silent. Cell service was gone too. The only sound was the engine and the low, steady heartbeat rising from the ground. Claire's hands gripped the wheel so tight her knuckles went white. Every pore, every family, every generation, it was all feeding this. Crow thought sealing it would stop the breathing, but he was just building its lungs. Kate stared out the window at the faint shimmer of the orchard trees bending in the wind. If that's true, what happens if we find the heart? Claire swallowed. Then we stop it for good. Lightning lit the sky, revealing the ruins of the old Marin concrete plant on the horizon. The place where the first foundations were mixed. The walls were skeletal, the roof half gone. It looked like a rib cage picked clean. They parked by the fence. The air hummed louder here, the rhythm slower, deeper, almost hypnotic. Claire pulled the last flashlight from the trunk and tucked the Whitfield film drive into her jacket pocket. This is where it began. Kate checked her gun, though they both knew bullets meant nothing against what lay underground. Lead the way. Inside, the plant smelled of rust and stagnant water. Rain leaked through the roof in silver threads. Dust motes drifted like ash in the beam of Claire's flashlight. The old mixers stood in a line, their drums still crusted with gray stone. They found the service stairs in the corner and descended into the lower level. The hum grew so strong it vibrated through their ribs. Pipes ran along the ceiling, each one sweating condensation. The concrete underfoot was cracked, pulsing faintly. Kate whispered, "Jesus, it's alive." Claire crouched, brushing dust from a plaque bolted to the wall. The inscription was almost gone, but one line was still legible. Orchard line, primary pour, /1954. She looked up. Ahead, a tunnel sloped downward, lit by a faint golden glow. They followed it, moving slowly. water lapping at their boots. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, circular, the ceiling lost in shadow. The walls pulsed faintly with light from within, each beat echoing in their chests. In the center of the chamber stood a massive column of concrete, fissured and weeping liquid light through its cracks. Embedded within it were faces, half-formed, shifting slowly like ripples in water. The hollow whisper of many voices filled the air, blending into one endless sigh. Claire raised her recorder, voice shaking. June 15th, 2024. Marin concrete underground chamber. Structure appears organic, heart-like. It's moving, Kate stepped closer. You think this is the heart? No, Claire whispered. This is the orchard line. The roots. The blood. As they watched, the surface of the column rippled, and the faint outline of a man emerged. Crow. His features were soft, distorted, but unmistakable. His mouth moved soundlessly before forming two clear words. Finish it. Kate took a step back, hand trembling on her gun. What does he mean? Claire's voice barely carried. He's telling us to pour again, to seal it. Seal this? You'll bury half the valley. It's the only way. The voices in the walls rose into a chorus, not angry, not pleading, something in between. Claire moved to one of the old control panels, its dials corroded but intact. The schematics showed what she needed. Emergency flood release valves, meant to redirect concrete overflow into the base chamber. If we open those, Kate said, reading her face, the mix from the upper silos will flood this whole place. It'll harden over the heart, Claire said. Crow tried to contain it, but he left the valves shut. He wanted a new keeper. That's what he meant. Kate stared at her. And you think that keeper is you? Claire met her eyes. Someone has to finish the pour. The ground shuddered violently, knocking them both off their feet. Cracks split the chamber walls, spilling liquid light. The voices screamed, not from pain, but from anticipation. Claire scrambled to the control panel, flipping the first switch. Somewhere above, machinery groaned to life for the first time in decades. The floor vibrated with rushing movement, wet, heavy. Claire! Kate shouted. You'll be trapped! Claire forced the final lever down. The sound was deafening, concrete roaring through the pipes, thundering toward the chamber. Kate grabbed her arm. Come on, we can outrun it. But Claire didn't move. She pulled the Whitfield film drive from her pocket and pressed it into Kate's hand. Take this. Show them what happened. Don't let them build again. Don't do this. Claire smiled faintly. I already started it. The first gray sheet thundered through the ceiling vents. Slurry hit hot rock and flashed to steam. It poured down in sheets, filling the fissures, crawling over the faces in the wall. The voices shifted from screams to something almost peaceful. A hum, slow and fading. Kate's back toward the tunnel, the flood chasing her. She turned once, seeing Claire still at the panel, bathed in the golden light. Their eyes met. Then the chamber filled. When Kate emerged onto the surface, the plant behind her collapsed inward, the ground sealing itself in a perfect ring of new stone. The hum stopped. The valley was silent again. She fell to her knees, clutching the drive in her fist. Rain washed the dust from the air, leaving only the smell of wet earth and concrete. From the ridge above, the orchard trees bent in the wind, their branches still. 2 weeks later, federal teams filled Marin Falls. They fenced the site, declared it unsafe, and offered survivors relocation. Reporters asked about Claire Hensley, the journalist who disappeared during an unauthorized investigation. Kate's never answered them. But on quiet nights, when the wind rolled down the valley, she sometimes heard it. The faint rhythm of a heartbeat, slow and steady, beneath the new foundation. And one evening, as she packed to leave town for good, she found a package on her car seat. A small concrete apple, smooth and cold, with a single line scratched across its surface. Son some things don't stay buried. Months later, a new subdivision began construction 20 miles north of Marin Falls. The developer, a company resurrected under a familiar name, touted it as a community built on proven ground. As the first truck released its load, the foreman paused. The concrete shimmered faintly in the sunlight, golden for just an instant before turning gray. He frowned, chalked it up to reflection, and waved the driver on. The mixer's drum rotated, the sound echoing through the valley, a low, rhythmic pulse, steady as a heartbeat.